Hi everyone and welcome back to our HaPi podcast, Healthcare and Pharmaceutical Insights. This series is going to be looking at launch excellence, and in this series I'm going to be speaking to a number of guests who all have experience of launching either products, companies or services, and will be able to offer some valuable advice to you if you're in that space. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Hi everyone and welcome back to another exciting episode of HaPi, and we're continuing in our series of launch excellence, and I'm really delighted to welcome Hannah Teather with us today. Hannah and I have been doing some work from a recruitment perspective and supporting her within her role just now. So welcome Hannah, great to see you. Thank you for coming along. I know that it's maybe the first time that Hannah's done this, and she might be slightly anxious, but that's perfectly normal. So Hannah, give us an intro, and let's hear who you are and a brief intro to yourself.
Cool. Thank you, Colin. My name's Hannah Teather. I have around 19 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry, came fresh out of a pharmacology degree at Liverpool. I've had various roles in the pharmaceutical industry, from sales, marketing, market access, and also leadership roles as well. In my spare time, I have 2 children, have big cats, and I also look after a number of horses as well. So that's what I do beyond the work life.
We're doing horses as well. That's something that we haven't discussed, actually. I might need to discuss that with you offline, because my daughter is obsessed with horses.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
Obsessed.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Obsessed. So that's the discussion for offline. But good. Thank you for that intro. And in these podcasts that I do with people like yourself, Hannah, and others, I'm sure there'll be many people watching this who will know you, and will have spoken to you in previous roles, possibly worked with you as well. So I do hope that people can interact with this. I'm sure if there's anything that comes out of this that Hannah's going to share, you've got any questions, either come to myself or Hannah, and we'll do our best to answer it. So we're continuing on launch excellence, and Hannah has some really good experience on this that I've asked her to share, and we'll go through some questions on this and keep the conversation flowing around this. So from your experience of launch excellence, Hannah, what would you say is your definition of this?
Do you know, I was thinking about this the other night, Colin, and there's a number of different definitions for me. And to keep it quite simply, is everyone singing from the same hymn sheet from an internal perspective. So that's sales, marketing, medical, supply, finance, the leadership team. Everybody needs to know what the other's doing. But to layer on top of that as well is the global functions also need to do what the affiliate's doing as well. Mm-hmm. Just so everyone's aligned, no one gets any surprises when you're in launch. In addition to this as well, all your external customers need to be informed. So that's not only reimbursement like NICE and SMC, but it's also things like your HCPs, your pharmacists, your nurses. To be honest, even you could go as far as a cleaner without being flippant, because everybody needs to know what the other's doing. And that for me is really true launch excellence when you're looking at both pre-launch, launch and post-launch.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot in the series I've had so far. A lot of the discussion has been around kind of pre-launch, post, right in the middle of it, you know, and there's no that's why it's good to get different perspectives on what the definition is. There's no exact dictionary definition of what launch excellence is, and it's a phrase that we hear a lot, and people go, what does that actually mean? And that's what we're going to try and get to the nub of just now. So from your own experience in this industry, Hannah, and within your role just now in previous roles, what's been your own experience of this?
It's been very mixed. I've had moments of absolute elation and excitement, and I've also had moments of despair as well, where things have tripped up or things have changed. But the one thing I'd say to all the listeners, that no launch is the same. However, the launch templates don't change dramatically from a pre-launch, a launch and a post-launch. So once you've got your first launch out of the way, it does get easier and easier. But it comes back to what I said at the beginning of the conversation, is everyone needs to sing from the same hymn sheet. But the other important thing I found as well is to be humble and also admit your mistakes when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
don't hide them. It's better to be honest with your bosses, with your teammates. You take the feedback and you move on. And I think that's the key important piece, because with a launch, there's no I in it. It's a
Mm-hmm.
team.
Mm-hmm.
And every team has to be accountable in terms of who's doing what and when. And
Mm-hmm.
that's absolutely key. So I think those are kind of the key things I've found in launches. Is when it's gone wrong, it's because we haven't been working well as a team, or there's been
Mm-hmm.
lack of communication. When it's worked really well, is the team's pulling in one way. You've got the communication is very, very high. And with Teams and Zoom that we have now, you're always interconnected with each other as well. So there's kind of no
Mm-hmm.
excuse for not talking.
Mm-hmm.
But the other piece is humbleness as well. So when you do get to launch day, the most important thing I've found is actually thanking those around you. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about the person on stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the people that have actually put that product into the market in front of the clinicians and the patients.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people that are important. I think when people have done very successful launches, that's one of the key things that I've seen people have appreciated,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is being thanked, and thanked also publicly as well by the general manager and the senior leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So they're fully integrated in terms of who's actually produced it. It's not one person, it might be 15 people within a company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you been in a situation then, Hannah, where you talked about the stage where you have got to the point where you're the person doing that final presentation in terms of, here we go, here's the launch, this is what happens, yeah? How did you, yeah, you've done that?
I've done that many times.
Yeah, yeah,
And I've also tripped many times on this as well. So I was in a
right,
situation where I tripped once and I forgot to mention one of the functions of market access.
okay.
And I apologised, literally on stage. I also talked to the person directly after the meetings on in front of the general manager, just to show what that person had contributed, how fundamental they'd been to the launch as well. So there's no ambiguity that they hadn't
Mm-hmm.
contributed. It was just a mistake on my part.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the doing it well, I generally have a list that I keep with me on the podium of every single key team member, because it means you can't forget anybody. And I also run
Mm-hmm.
it through with one of my team prior to being on stage as well. But that's also critical.
Yeah.
The other bit I tend to do as well when I talk around launches, I talk around the group. I don't talk around individuals. It keeps the inclusivity of everybody, but also it shows there's no favoritism across any team member. I think that's absolutely key as well to show, because every team member, from medical to supply to sales to marketing, etc., is key,
Mm-hmm.
and they've
Mm-hmm.
all always had a role to play as well. I think public individual compliments, you have to be very careful with it. It's better to do it as a team compliment,
Mm-hmm.
because it's much more authentic, and also every team member feels appreciated as well at the same time.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like the credits rolling at the end of a TV program, isn't it? When everybody's names coming up in terms of what's been involved. It's not necessarily just down to that star or the show. It's round
No,
to everybody that's been involved in helping make that happen, isn't it?
exactly. Every person is a cog in the machine that launched the product.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody is absolutely important. It's like kind of like in the Star Wars credits. When you look at the writing coming down, the font's the same. Every
Mm-hmm.
single team member is the same in terms of how much they've
Yeah, that's true.
contributed.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't matter big or small, because if something hadn't been contributed by one function, that could bring the whole launch down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes people forget that as well. It's not just about sales and marketing, it's about every single function, even
Yeah,
as low as the administrator who's actually arranged the congresses to do all the pre-license work.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
key.
Good. So, I mean, we've kind of touched on this at the moment in terms of the kind of key things to consider. You've talked about what your own experience is, maybe of launching there just now, but in terms of the key things to consider, have you got a couple of things that you can maybe share that are important over and above what you just discussed there just now?
Absolutely. For me, there's kind of three phases to a launch. You have the pre-launch, which is kind of 3 to 6 years out. You have the launch, which is a year out from kind of reimbursement. And you also have the post-launch, which is a year. So a lot of people, what they tend to do is they do the pre-launch, the launch, and they forget the post,
Mm-hmm.
because the post that's where the proof in the pudding is. of really embedding the product, building the market share, building the customer usage. So those are the kind of key elements I tend to focus on with a launch with my team when we're looking at future products. The other key bit that I've learned as well is you have to define the roles and responsibilities of every team member within the brand team. And also as well, you need to ensure there's no ambiguity. So everybody in that team is accountable. And how you actually pull that together is either you employ an external project manager who maps out the entire launch start to finish. You have key deliverables week on week, so weekly stand-ups as well. So every team member comes to the stand-up, which is about half an hour to 45 minutes, and you run the launch top to bottom. Where are we this week? Complete, not complete. If it's not complete, why isn't it complete? And that's been, for me, one of the key elements that's really made the launches that I've been successful. Everyone knows what the other person's doing. If it's not been done, why hasn't it been done? But also it engages the team when things aren't going well, i.e., if a team member hasn't done something, do they need additional support and help that maybe we hadn't thought about before? But the other key piece as well is that you can escalate very quickly. And this is where global comes in, particularly if you have a supply chain where the product is coming from abroad. They need to know very early on the forecasting. They need to know how many days it's going to take to ship it over to the UK, as an example.
Yeah.
All of that needs to be completely integrated. Same with the marketing materials as well, particularly it's a globally governed company, which most pharmaceuticals are. They need to have the insight very, very early on. So it's things like involving them in your pre-launch ad boards. So they have the same insights that you have, because the UK, particularly with NICE affecting a lot of global markets at the moment, it's easier to incorporate a lot from the UK insights than it is from other affiliates, because ultimately they follow NICE.
Yeah, of course.
So that's kind of a key bit that I would actually say as well. The other bit I would say is involve leadership throughout, even if it's just a monthly check-in, 10 minutes over a coffee. It doesn't need to be anything formal, but what it stops is if the leader is stopped in the corridor, or the boss rings from Western Europe, or the CEO rings from global, they know what to say.
Yeah.
You don't want a boss to be in a situation where they can't answer the questions that are being asked.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've done as a team, we had a weekly hymn sheet, which was then sent to the Western Europe Vice President. Vice President could then go to the CEO. So he had a constant feedback loop week on week for them.
Okay.
A, it stopped difficult questions. And B, it showed the affiliate were in control. When you have a vice president that sees an affiliate in control, they tend to leave you be, which is really great, as a great position to be in. But the only way that happens is by you buying credibility, which is giving them the time to have the insight of what's going on. But also this is what comes into on a post-launch aspect, is when you've launched, everyone's interested on your sales. Of course they are.
Yeah.
But from a global perspective, one of the things we've always done with all our launches is we supply a weekly sales report.
Okay.
To our vice presidents. The reason we do that is, A, if the CEO asks what's going on with X launch, they can answer it immediately. B, they have our insights, and C, if the sales are dipping, they know why they're dipping.
Yeah.
As well. So again, it's a constant feedback loop. So the other thing I would say is think about what reports you want to produce and for whom, and what do you want them to do for that person as well. If you're in a position where your senior leaders are asking a lot of questions, that means they're not getting enough information from you.
Yeah.
So it's better to front load. So when you're thinking about the reports, I would almost start to think about it in pre-launch phase and agree with your leaders. What types of reports are you going to be looking for? Who do you need the reports for when we launch? And again, it shows that you're on the front foot for them. Because ultimately they're only as good as the people underneath them. If they have the information, they can handle it very carefully.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been a real key learning for me, because I haven't always done it in the past. And it's something I've learned over my career as well, is being a high communicator with the relevant information in a succinct manner will help a launch team. Because it means that people tend to ask us questions, which is what you need, but it also builds trust. as well across the different management teams. And also what you can do as well is actually provide that as best practice to other affiliates. So it helps them so that when they're in the same boat 3, 6, 12 months later, something's already built for them. So it saves people time as well, which again builds partnership and trust across the affiliates, which is really key. Because I think sometimes countries forget about that.
Yeah, of course.
Because if you're one of the big 5 like we have in the UK, it's great. But Poland might not have that. They need more. So if you could provide them a few examples that you've produced, I think it makes a massive difference to them as well. I think the other key thing to bear in mind when we're launching as well is the pre-launch phase and involving the healthcare professionals early and the patient groups.
Yeah.
Understanding what are the impacts of the NHS is happening to them at the moment, particularly with the potential changes in government. You've got VPAG going on at the moment as well. How's that impacting them? But in addition to that is the patient groups. What's going on with patients at the moment post-COVID? Is it still occurring? And it will differ dependent on the therapy area you're going into. We all know that oncology has been massively hit at the moment in terms of the waiting list, and same with dermatology as well. But they will have their needs and their focuses for the year that they're focusing on. So the objectives for 24-25 might be very different to 25-26 potentially when you're launching. And I think it's definitely something that you can't afford to miss, because ultimately I think if you have their back as well in terms of giving them the information they need and you understand them and seek to understand, I think you're in a much better place in the long run as well, which is key.
It's really interesting listening to all of this, Hannah, even in your earlier comments, where so much of the success around this is building that trust with many different partners, isn't it? You've just finished your comments there on the external partners that you need to build that trust with, your healthcare professionals, your patient groups. Then you've got your internal partners, making sure that everybody's aware of what's happening, what stage we're at, because they've got somebody else that they need to make aware of everything. So it's it's not a case of always just I'm doing this because I have to. But obviously, there is. But it's to build that trust, to say, am I doing what I'm meant to be doing? Are you doing what you're meant to be? Absolutely great. Then we'll build it, and it will be a success. And there's occasions where, as you just highlighted there, that something happens and it doesn't get done for whatever reason.
No.
Fine, well, let's get it done. Let's talk about it. Let's change that, because if it starts to become a bit of a blame in terms of why have you not done that,
it's a nightmare.
It just falls. It falls off a cliff. So building that trust, building that understanding, accountability with each other, is certainly something that is an underlying theme in terms of what you're saying is coming through.
Yeah, completely.
What are some of the biggest challenges then that you have seen that you've had to overcome when you've been in launching? Or
there's been many, I would say. The most pertinent one, I think, and a lot of marketeers and salespeople have found themselves in this position in the last 4 years, is probably launching in the middle of a pandemic and switching overnight from face-to-face to technology, so Teams and Zoom, and being put in that position where a lot of people didn't have the technical capability to even switch over. And we all know it switched overnight as well. As literally within 24 hours, we went from potentially face-to-face, it was slowing down, in 2020, and then it stopped. And that for me was a real eye-opener, because as a pharmaceutical company at the time, we were still in launch, but we had to be very cognizant of what was going on with the customers and their floor tile, because you had PTSD going on there, you had waiting lists stopped overnight, there were certain areas that could progress and certain areas couldn't. So my biggest challenge with that was, how was I, with my team, as flexible as possible with the NHS, whilst also building the impetus for a pre-launch drug? And in addition to that, how did we need to upskill our sales force at the time with the technical capability to even have a call? And the NHS were in the same boat at this point.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
It's a whole new world. I remember being on a call with one of my sales team, and I think we spent the entire time looking up the consultant's nose, because they had no technical capability either. It was fascinating.
I still have to do that with my mum, to be honest with you, on occasions.
Amazing.
You know, I mean, we're still, what, 4 or 5 years out of it, and you're still saying, Mum, camera on, Mum, do this. I
Yeah,
know what you mean.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it was across the board as well. But we still needed at the time to supply drugs to the patients, and we needed, in order to do that, we had to talk to the HCPs. And in terms of how I overcame that, we ended up having a very pragmatic discussion with our sales team of what they needed versus what they didn't. And we brought in digital trainers within literally a couple of weeks, and we had
Right.
digital training weekly in order to upskill them.
Yeah.
And it didn't always work, but majority of the time, I think we got to where we needed to be. But also as well, it was changing the technology we use. So you had most people using iPads. We had to change back to laptop as well, because the iPads didn't always project that well when you were in a team setting.
Yeah.
And it was all those aspects. But I think, again, that's where communication comes in, and honesty, because I was having to talk to my boss at the time of, this is the situation we're in, this is what we're going to do, and this is the solution. And I think people forget that sometimes, of when you're in a highly pressurized situation, people forget to think about the solution rather than just allaying the panic. And it'll give you time to breathe as well if you can provide the leader with a potential solution to something. And I think, again, it moves them on in their understanding of what the challenges you are that face you as well. We ended up having to do our entire training, 5-week training on a product online. We couldn't do any of it face to face.
Yeah.
And I've never done that in my career. I hope I never have to do it again.
Yeah.
But it was a massive learning curve, but we completely changed the way we were working because of it. And I think it's given us much bigger skill sets to what we've had in the past. I've been in situations as well where I joined a company, I had 8 months until we launched a new indication, and we'd never engaged the key opinion leaders.
Right, okay.
That was a very interesting situation to be. And also, I think it was learning the importance of being humble, admitting mistakes, and reaching out to the key healthcare professionals and working very collaboratively, very quickly, and really utilising the medical team who already had the relationships. And I think sometimes medical, particularly MSLs, get overlooked, but they're absolutely crucial to your pre-launch phase and your relationships with your customers.
Yeah.
And that really was emphasised in the situation I was put in. We ended up being in a position where we launched within literally 8 months. We had the top 10 key opinion leaders with us, and we also involved them in the training of the representatives as well. And I think that's another thing to bear in mind is, don't just think it needs to be a field sales trainer that you can engage with. The company could actually be the healthcare professionals themselves. It means that you start to build trust with them. You also increase your relationships, but equally you start to embed their knowledge versus your company's knowledge on the product. And that's really key. And I think sometimes that's a little bit overlooked as well.
Yeah.
I've been in other situations where the marketing authorization's been 4 weeks early.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
And that resulted in us pulling the sales team within a week in order to fast track the launch, because every day, as you know, particularly when you've got nice reimbursement, counts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that was a really great situation to be in, because it was all hands on deck in terms of getting everything approved, but equally as well, it really showed team resilience and how we work together. And I'm still in contact with those team members now. It doesn't fade even when you move away from a launch team.
Yeah.
You remember each other because you've been in such adverse conditions, and you've also won a lot of things as well. But it really builds your friendships, you know. And I think the other thing, you know, situations I've been in is I had a 8 a.m. symposium at a very highly attended congress, and the speaker changed the slides at 2 a.m. and the symposium was at 8 a.m. But because of the relationship we had with the medical advisor, we were able to wake him up at 6 to reapprove the slides again.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But again, even now, this is 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We still contact each other on LinkedIn. Do you remember
Yeah.
that time?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
different situations, but
Yeah. I
also I
love that.
think
Yeah.
it's really great. And I think it
Yeah.
also shows as well the importance of saying thank you, because
Yeah.
it's these people that get you to the end game and get your
Mhm.
product launched into the market. So there's a lot of different scenarios
Yeah.
you put in. And I think in a launch, and I would include pre-launch, launch and post-launch of this, you're going to be put in very adverse conditions at times.
Mhm.
You will trip, but you'll also have a lot of successes as well.
Mhm.
And I think at
Mhm.
every point, it's showing that humbleness to admit the mistakes, resolve them,
Mhm.
thank the people for resolving them,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then moving on, but also celebrating when you do actually launch as well. And when the patient gets that physical drug in their hand, that's massive. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes we forget there's a patient at the end of this waiting for something that could either extend their life, or they could save their life, or it could stop the
Absolutely.
progression of a disease. And I think that's a really key thing that we sometimes forget.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. We're too busy maybe focusing on the commercial wins. And yeah, I mean, but, when you're in a commercial business, you're in a business that's understandable. You've got other pressures coming to you, but you actually forget, what are we doing? I think it's always good. You probably do this at occasions. You just strip that right back and say, what is the reason why we're
Yes.
doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we launching this product? Who ultimately is this going to benefit? It's going to benefit that person walking into that consultant's room to discuss, a life-threatening illness potentially, depending on what the drug is. And yes, it's from a commercial stand. It's a place where we've been involved in that experience and helping them, and hopefully curing them, or extending their life or whatever. So I think that's something that has been mentioned a couple of times on this series. Actually, is it's just always remembering, what are we doing this? Who is this for at the end?
Yeah.
And then everything, not everything else, but most of it will then kind of fall into play before that.
Yeah.
Great. Final question. This is the one question I always keep fairly consistent. There'll be people, I'm sure, watching this and taking a lot from what you've said and what you've shared, and they're potentially either moving into a role which is going to involve launch excellence or product launch, etc., or just at the very early stages of this. What advice can you offer somebody in that position?
I was trying to think about this yesterday, and what would I have offered myself before I went into launches? That's kind of the way I've come from it. So there's a couple of areas. I think, first of all, your team will lead you to success in your launch. Be respectful, be humble, support them, celebrate the highs, but also learn from the lows, because that's
Hmm.
when they're going to make you stronger as a team, but also as individuals as well. The other piece I think people forget is your vendors are absolutely critical to this. This is your recruitment companies, this is your design companies, your
Hmm.
video companies, your congress companies. They are an extension of your company,
Hmm.
and they should be seen as a partner. They're not separate to you. And I think as well, sometimes we forget that, because they are ambassadors of you. So they are only as good as the brief that you give them.
Hmm.
And the other bit I'd say with this is, don't forget to thank them when you launch and at each phase, because without them, you wouldn't be where you are,
Hmm.
because you
Hmm.
can't do everything in-house. It's
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, and that's something that I've always kept to, as I learned that very, very early on in my career. You need them.
Hmm.
And it's not just about the money that exchanges between the two parties. It's, what do they bring to the table? What facets do they add that you don't have at the moment? Be appreciative of that and be respectful, because
Hmm.
you need them.
Hmm.
They don't necessarily need you. And I think as well, people forget that it is a partnership, and it's an
Hmm.
extension of the company, whoever you are.
Hmm.
And they're absolutely critical as well. The other thing I've learned as well is maybe consider bringing an external project manager if you don't have the project management skills.
Hmm.
Every facet of the launch, from pre-launch and post, needs to be mapped
Hmm.
across every swim lane for each individual brand member. If that's something you're not comfortable with, bring someone else that does know how to do it. And there's
Hmm.
companies that can provide you with that as well. You
Yeah.
could just have them for pre-launch and launch and stop at post. But but I found them, from my experience, absolutely critical, particularly when you're working with multiple products with multiple lines. That's a very interesting situation to be in as well. You just need that extra bit of help to move forward. The other thing I'd suggest as well, and there's been a learning for a number of launches, is make sure you review your contracts that you have with your vendors prior to going into a launch situation. Do the appendices stack up with what you need to do at launch? If they don't, can you change them? A lot of people forget to look at the contracts and then are put in situations where the vendor can't actually do that for them because they haven't checked. I think people need to be really careful in that as well. The other piece I've learned is don't shy away from difficult conversations. Your team will trip. Be respectful, but also as well, call it out, keep moving, and put a line under it. It's a learn. It doesn't matter. And then there should never, ever be any launching finger pointing, because when it's finger pointing, it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's better to catch it and move. It's just a waste of time, which you haven't got ultimately to do that as well. The other key pieces, I think, is understand the needs of your customers. And by customers, I call multiple layers. So it's your internal customers, so your leadership team, the other teams surrounding the company, global. Externally, it's your HCPs, it's your patients, it's your patient groups. Take the time to really understand what they need. Also understand what they're looking at as well. You can't launch a product without knowing what they need, because there might be something in the product that isn't quite right. If you've got time to course correct that as well, there's no harm in it. And I would say my final point is, you get to launch a product right once. You don't get to launch the same product again. And it kind of goes back to...
That's a great point. That's really... Nobody said that, so there we go. There's a snippet. That's a great point.
Yeah, it's really key, and it goes back to what they do in the NHS and at Mercedes and Bentley as well, which is get it right first time. And you get it right first time by being absolutely pernickety and perfectionist about all the swim lanes and all the accountable parts of the launch, because you get to launch once.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hannah. That's never thought about it like that from that perspective, as you say, because you only get that one presentation we talked about at the start where you've been on that stage. You only get to do that once. Now there's so much that leads up to that actual point.
Yeah.
But as you say, you only get to get to that stage one. So that's brilliant. That's a really, really good bit. You've left the best piece of advice till the end. So that's good. Listen, that's excellent. A lot of valuable stuff within our conversation here. For somebody who said to me before we started recording that they were slightly nervous about coming on, that is not shown at all, and I'm sure everybody's watching will agree with me. You've been very open, and I think it's one of the things we try and do in these conversations is we just try as much as we can with people just to try and remove that kind of barrier of sharing best practice.
Yeah,
helping other people within our industry, helping our industry become better, and that's exactly what you've done today. So I appreciate it. I'm sure many other people will appreciate it. So thank you very much for spending time with me.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Take care. Bye for now, everyone.